funding so far. And we are really investing heavily into the functionality of our platform as a whole and into our ALIA Labs department. And ALIA Labs is something that sets us apart from most of our competitors because we invest millions of dollars every single year into doing cool projects with data. We, being in Montreal, which is the AI capital of the world, we have the opportunity to employ some of the brightest AI professionals in the world, and they play with our tenant data. We're leveraging things like machine learning, neural networks, and natural language processing, computer vision, optimization, all of these other cool tools. And we're doing things like predicting if your client is going to go to the ER in the next 3 days, or route and schedule optimization so that you can save time and money in your overhead and really maximize your caregiver schedule. We're even to the point where we can predict employee churn, which is something that is a hot topic for everybody this year and all the time, but it's bad this year. And ALIA Care, we also believe that we should really focus on our core functionality, what we do best. And what we do best is perfecting our practice management so that we can live up to our reputation of being the better outcomes company. That being said, we also recognize that in order to be successful, we have to support interoperability. If you in that growth summit, you're hearing this, you got to be able to communicate with your partners, and you got to be able to accept referrals electronically. You got to be able to get those doctor's signatures electronically. You got to be able to do all this stuff and communicate with the home health partner and the hospice partner. We do that. We support you in that by leveraging our open APIs so that we can connect with a variety of external applications and even health systems. So that allows you to create a practice management platform that is unique to your business needs. Here's the slide. This is some of our existing partnerships. We have 84 connections today, and that number is growing on a monthly basis. Here's the brag slide, right? These are some of our trusted partners in the US. We're a global company, so I'm not showing you anything that is in the Australian market or in the Canadian market, but in our short tenure in the US, just a little over 3 years that we've been targeting the US, we've gained the trust of some of the giants in the space. Bayada, Nurse Next Door, Alara Caring, Accent Care, they all use our product. Prior to entering the US market, we gained 80% of the market share in Canada and just under that in Australia. And now we're really focusing on the US market because we want to provide the best electronic medical record solutions available. It is our goal to give you the opportunity to work on your business rather than in your business and be in the weeds and putting out fires every day and being mired in spreadsheets every day. Because we really do just want to enable you to do what you do best. And that's, of course, client care. Now, I think that's basically all I had for you guys today. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce myself, introduce ALIA Care. I look forward to working alongside all of you in the association in the coming months and years. Feel free to connect with me. Here's my digits. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with you about technology in general, even if you don't choose to partner with ALIA Care.
Cool. Thank you, Erin. I'll say, you know, I got started in this industry like 11 years ago, and boy, has software changed from back at that point in time. It's from, you know, I don't have a whole much experience at all with your company, but from hearing what you're talking about, it's just, it's amazing. I know things have just come so far, so quickly. And it's, you know, it was basically like spreadsheets. It wasn't much more than spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets back in the day. And it's obviously come so much further. So yeah, I actually set up a meeting with Erin for next week to talk a little bit more with her, and interested in do so because she picked my interest from what you're just saying there. So thank you again, Erin.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so I kind of forgot in the beginning to more so introduce myself as well, some housekeeping stuff, but to let you know, I am Jude Terrace. I'm an AZNHA board member. kind of on a second term. I just restarted this year after being a board member for a few years, maybe about 7 or so years ago. But thanks for joining us today. That was Aaron from AlayaCare. And to let you all know that you've all been muted, just to try to cut down on the noise disruptions as you may be working from various places or on the road or wherever you may be there. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of our presentation here. But feel free, if you have questions, to type those into the what's it called, the comment section or question section there. Or if you want, you can just save them to the end, as we'll open it up to questions at that point in time there as well. Finally, we are recording this session as well. So if you do have something that pops up that you have to run, know that we'll be making this available on our members only section in a little bit later down the road here, so that you can come back if you need to. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce you to our presenter today. We have Rachel Barrett, who is an experienced nurse leader with more than is years in healthcare. So I can only imagine what software looked like 30 years ago, because I'm saying 10 years ago, non-existent. So probably wasn't even an Excel spreadsheet at that time. But she's worked in a variety of roles, from staff nurse to case manager to clinical nurse specialist to nursing VP, chief nursing officer. And she's now in her current role as a senior vice president with Hospice of the Valley, that she's been in that role for a handful of years now. Rachel's here to talk with us a little bit more about the COVID-19 vaccine and testing, along with the myths and facts that go along with it. And I think this is a great time to talk about it, because personally, and I think hopefully like many of the other agency owners on this call, you know, I was pleasantly surprised a few months ago to find out that we were part of the phase 1A group. And I could speak for myself and my company and my caregivers, but we kind of reflected the national average, which was very unfortunately low, about a 30 to 40% vaccination turnout. But we've been working hard at it and improving that number, and hoping that Rachel could, you know, share some tips and so forth to educate us so that we could get those numbers up even greater with our staffs there. So with that said, go ahead and take it away, Rachel.
Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for joining today. I will talk about all 3 of the vaccines that are currently available. I know there's lots of talk in the media about the AstraZeneca vaccine, but we won't cover that today, mostly because the data around the vaccine aren't made available until after emergency use authorization is granted. So there's limited information in the CDC for me to share about AstraZeneca. And I guess we'll be having some Q&A afterwards. I'm also happy to share these slides. There's information when we get to testing and how to get your own vaccine center set up that I'm happy to share with you using the slides. So let's see if I can get this moving here. You'd think after all these months, there we go. Can everybody see my slides? Just want to make sure people are able to view the regular slides.
Yes.
Perfect.
That looks good.
Okay. So, you know, let's start with one of the things that we found here, and we just closed our own pod, having provided 1,200 vaccines here at Hospice of the Valley, is that education really helps to remove some of the fears and concerns that people have. And so really talking about why should somebody consider vaccination from the point of view of the individual has been critical, both for us and just kind of in the general public. Vaccinations do provide increased protection for the individual themselves. It also helps to slow the spread of COVID in the facility. We know that once somebody is vaccinated, that there is a low risk of them being a vector carrying the COVID virus to another person, and then it helps stop spread in the community. Also, we've heard from lots of the folks that we've vaccinated that it makes them feel better knowing that any of the work that they do, there's a low risk of them bringing it back to their families as well. And as the vaccine rollout is going to take several more months, that protection is a critical factor for people to consider. So some common questions that we've dealt with are, how do we know that the vaccine is effective and safe? Why should we trust any vaccine? Is there a new technology that's being used, and is that dangerous? Lots and lots of discussion about what is emergency use authorization, and we'll talk about all of these questions. One of the ones we still don't know, and I'll just get this out of the way, is how long will I be protected once I'm vaccinated? The studies for both Pfizer, Moderna, as well as J&J are ongoing. Those trial participants are still having their blood drawn at regular intervals to see how long the protection lasts for. We know that with both the Pfizer and the Mrna vaccine, it takes 2 weeks after the second dose for full protection to be gained. With the J&J vaccine, which is a single dose vaccine, it takes 28 days after vaccination for full protection to be reached. But how long that protection lasts, that's still an ongoing question. As of next month, we know that it will at least be 1 year of protection because all of the vaccine participants were enrolled in April. And so as the data come in, we'll know whether or not we need a booster every year, every 18 months. Maybe it's an individual level of protection and revaccination. Those are all questions that are yet to be answered. We'll talk about still wearing a mask, the side effects of vaccination, what to do if somebody's already had COVID. And that's a big issue. You know, in the very beginning, when the vaccine supply was low, there was lots of talk about if you've had COVID to wait 3 months or so to allow people who'd not had any kind of immune protection the opportunity to get vaccinated. The CDC has now pulled that back. They're saying that you can become vaccine eligible as soon as you're cleared from isolation from COVID, and they're encouraging people who are in a group that's eligible for vaccination to get it as soon as possible. And then we'll talk about getting accurate information. So are the COVID vaccines safe? You know, this is still a big question. Even with so many millions having been vaccinated, we know that people are still concerned. I think the most important thing for you to know and for you to tell your staff, your anyone that you're talking with, whether it's family members or residents, that while they have sped up the approval process, they have not taken one shortcut in terms of clinical trials. So these trials had to go through the exact same steps in terms of animal testing, and then they had testing on humans. What got cut were all the corners that the red tape and paperwork takes. So, you know, normally when they look, the FDA looks to approve something, they do it in line with everything else. When emergency use authorization is given, they're able to say, we understand that the vaccine is safe, even if all the data around how frequently somebody might need to get revaccinated, et cetera, are still being looked at. So to understand that the FDA requires about 3,000 people to look at the efficacy of a drug that it approves, the COVID vaccines, the Mrna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine trials each had between 30 and 44,000 participants in those trials. So these were very large scale trials. And so we are confident after the vaccine's approval that, you know, these are safe vaccines. And we'll talk about how they were developed in just a minute. Whoops. So when we look at the overall efficacy, and this is important, the Pfizer vaccine provides 95% protection from having an infection, and the Mrna vaccine provides 94% protection from having an infection. Both of these vaccines were widely tested, different races, different ethnicities, different ages, so that they can really say with confidence that no matter what your race, your age, or your ethnicity, this vaccine has been tested on like individuals and proven to be safe and effective. Just so that we're understanding, especially when we get to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine discussion, a vaccine that the FDA approves must be at least 50% effective in order to be approved. So the fact that both the Pfizer and the Mrna have very high levels of protection are important. But one of the things that it's important to realize as well is that each vaccine set up its clinical trials a little bit differently. So the fact that Pfizer and Moderna talk about overall efficacy really shows that they grouped all the participants and really looked at that kind of monolithically, so that if somebody got sick and they were hospitalized, that counted the same way that somebody got sick, but they didn't have any symptoms. The reason that I'm pointing this out is that the J&J vaccine looked at every kind of level of infection differently. And so when you look at the J&J vaccine, you cannot compare the efficacy to Pfizer and Moderna because they separated out each of the groups of individuals and the kind of illness that they got. When you look at the effectiveness of the J&J vaccine, it's 100% effective against COVID causing death and 98% against hospitalizations. So it's an apples and oranges comparison. And there's been a lot of discussion in communities, frankly, about people shopping for the Pfizer or Moderna, thinking that that's a better vaccine and, it provides them more protection. But it's not an effective comparison. All the vaccines, all three vaccines, provide very strong protection against the most serious kinds of infection with COVID. The J&J vaccine, as we'll talk about, provides some added benefit because it was tested in South Africa and in Brazil. And we know that those are where two of the most significant variants of COVID have come from. And the fact that the J&J vaccine are effective in those areas means that it's also effective against those variants. And that's information we don't yet know about the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So just something for you to keep in mind. I've heard a lot on the news. I heard Dr. Fauci talking about the best vaccine is the one that you have access to. And that's really the truth. Getting vaccinated, regardless of who manufactured it, is really the most important piece of this. Shopping for vaccines can just cause lots of needless confusion, clog up the system, and delay the kind of group immunity that we're all hoping for that will let us get back to normal. So as I said, who was included in the vaccine trials? Pfizer had over 40,000 participants. 30% were racially diverse, 10% were Black, 13% were Hispanic. 45% of participants were between 56 and 85 years old. Likewise, the Mrna vaccine, very racially diverse, 37% racially diverse population of the 25,000 tested. 10% were Black, 20% were Latin or Latino or Hispanic, and 23% were greater than 65 years old. So again, very much confident in a very diverse pool of people being looked at in terms of the safety of the vaccine across race, age, and ethnicity. So why should we trust it? Because the FDA didn't skip anything. They used the same standards, and there were two independent advisory committees who had no ties to the manufacturers, no conflicts of interest. They looked over literally tens of thousands of pages of data before they gave approval for both these vaccines, as well as the J&J vaccine. So, I think when we hear people say, well, they must have skipped steps or they rushed this into development, it's important for us to be able to talk about how the vaccine was developed and the fact that all the people who are participating are still participating in the clinical trials so that the later steps of vaccine approval can be given by the FDA. Full approval will be given once the FDA understands the timeline for revaccination, et cetera. The other thing that I want to really point out is that in the history of vaccine development, very, very few issues arise after a week of vaccination. So once somebody is vaccinated and the immune system of that individual has kind of processed that vaccine, very low incidences of later issues in terms of safety and efficacy. So that's another reason that the FDA was able to provide emergency use authorization, is that they understand that over the course of all the vaccines that they've been approving for years and years, any issues that arise tend to happen within that first week. And so the longer period, I think it was 7 months that the first vaccine was approved, they were able to say that it was safe. All that they needed to understand was how long that somebody was protected for, and that's information still getting discovered. So what is emergency use authorization? It's based on the need to get something into the market very quickly during a public health emergency. It is very rarely used. They do look at all the clinical data, and they look at whether or not any known and potential benefits outweigh the known and potential risks. In both cases with the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, they were able to do that relatively quickly. And then the J&J vaccine, it got into development, into the phase 3 clinical trials later, and so it was approved later. 2 separate boards reviewed the data. And again, it does not imply that anything was done too quickly. It just looks at the safety of the vaccine as other data are collected. So how was the mRNA vaccine developed so quickly? Really, I think this is a way for us to be very proud, kind of on a global sense. Everybody was focused on one task. They shared all of their information between researchers. So when Moderna found something, it was happy to share it with Pfizer, and vice versa. Companies that were not Pfizer or Moderna were provided the blueprint for vaccine development. For example, in India, they were given this information very early on so that they could gear up to begin producing vaccines. And then we know all the millions and millions and millions of dollars that were put towards having this single goal. And people were eager to volunteer. And so trial participant accrual happened very, very quickly. It's not uncommon, say in an oncology clinical trial or any one of these clinical trials, for it to take several years or even a decade for accrual to happen. But with the vaccine trials, people were so eager to step up and be part of this that they were able to reach accrual limits very, very quickly. And that helped to speed everything up as well. So the first 2 vaccines that came to market, everybody knows now, both are mRNA vaccines. That stands for messenger RNA. Neither one contains the COVID-19 virus. I think that's also important because some people were mistakenly thinking that if they got vaccinated that they'd need to quarantine for a period, or that maybe they could get COVID-19 from getting the vaccine. That is not the case at all. Neither one of these contains any COVID-19 virus. What they do contain are pieces of messenger RNA that trigger your immune system, your B and T lymphocytes, to recognize the proteins that stick out on the COVID virus itself. Essentially, it's like holding up a signpost for your immune system to say, if you ever see this again, I want you to attack it and get rid of it and recognize that it's a foreign entity and doesn't belong in our body. So you can see here on the picture underneath where it says COVID-19 vaccine is mRNA. What is that? Those things sticking up, those are the protein spikes that are on the surface of the COVID-19 virus. And that is what the mRNA vaccine triggers your immune system to look for. It isn't new. It's been being used for more than a decade in cancer treatments. And really, it just, as I said, gives your body instructions to make a harmless piece that looks just like the spike protein. The reason that people tend to have a more significant immune response with these vaccines with the second dose versus the first dose is because your body has already produced some of these messengers. And when you get the second dose, it triggers your immune system's response, which is exactly what we want. We want your body to recognize this. It's why you go from 60% protection with your first dose to 95, 94% protection with your second dose, is because it really gears your immune system to see COVID and to recognize it as other. Can the mRNA vaccine give you COVID? No. Can it change your DNA? Absolutely not. There is nothing in this vaccine that can do anything to your DNA or give you any kind of illness. Now, it does get your immune system going, and so you may have short-term 24 to 48 hours worth of immune responses. But as I've told countless people during our vaccination events here, it just means your body is doing what the vaccine is telling it to do in terms of recognizing COVID and gearing itself up. So people should just medicate for the symptoms and know that within a day or two, they'll feel better. So when and how long will I be protected? As I said, we don't know. The two vaccines that we've talked about so far are 2 doses given either 3 weeks apart in this case of Pfizer or 4 weeks apart in the case of Moderna. And protection occurs about 2 weeks after the second dose. There is quite a lot of thinking now that we will need regular vaccine booster shots for COVID-19, much like we do the flu shot, and that they will begin to incorporate some of the variants into the vaccine boosters, which is just what happens with the flu vaccine every year. So it'll look a lot like that. So, as I said, the COVID vaccine cannot give you COVID-19. You can expect some short-term discomfort. Here are some of the things that people have complained of. Fatigue tends to be a pretty important one, and most people do get a little tired. Sorry. Headache, muscle pain, chills, fever, and the fever can be quite high. I just want to point out, we've had reports of people with temps as high as 102. Mine went up to 101 about 24 hours after my second dose. I didn't have any fever with the first one, but it responds very well to Tylenol. Some people can have pain at the injection site. Because these vaccines, these 2 vaccines, are both lipid-based or fat-based vaccines, some people have developed a kind of a red sore arm a few days later. That is not cellulitis. It is just an injection site reaction. You can use warm compresses. It does not prevent you from getting your second dose if it happens with your first dose. It's just your body kind of recognizing that there is a foreign substance there and it's dealing with that or causing some minor inflammatory response there. But just want to point out that is not any kind of allergic reaction, and it is not a contraindication to getting your second dose of the vaccine. Reactions typically start about 12 hours after getting the vaccine. They last for between 1 and 3 days, more pronounced after the second dose. So it's important that people understand that side effects does not mean it's a reaction per se to the vaccine. It's really an immune response, because we don't want people to not get their second dose. Sometimes if people have a stronger immune response with their first dose, they don't want to get a second dose, but it's very important. The protection that the studies have shown are all based on a 2-dose administration for both Pfizer and Moderna. So although you have 60% protection after your first dose, they have not studied whether or not that protection fades more quickly. In other words, are you protected for less time? But we do know that with that second dose, you have the greater protection up to 95%, and we know that it lasts for a period of time. So people thinking, oh, I'll just get 1 dose and then I'll be fine, that is a dangerous assumption, and one that we should really counsel people against. So the most common side effects based on the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines: fever, fatigue, as I said, was a very common one, up to almost 60%, headache, muscle pain, and those side effects were much more common after the second dose. So as I said, you must get the second dose. It's important to get the same manufacturer. So if you've started with Pfizer, your second dose should be Pfizer. There was discussion a few months ago that, could you cross over vaccines if there wasn't a vaccine of the same type available? There is some thought that you could, but that's only if it's not available. And we're very lucky. Maricopa County's done, I think, a fairly good job of making sure that people have resources, and we'll talk about that at the end, to find the same manufacturer for their second dose shot. So it has not been needed to get a different manufacturer than the one you've been given the first time. So let's talk a little bit about the J&J vaccine. So this actually uses a modified cold virus. It makes copies of the spike protein. So in essence, it works very similarly. It allows for your immune response to prepare your body to see those spike proteins and fight against it. The J&J vaccine was actually based on the Ebola vaccine, which was approved in 2019 for general use. So they were able to take that vaccine prototype and modify it to fight against COVID. As everybody knows by now, it's just one and done. It's a single vaccine, and it provides, as I said, 100% protection against death from COVID, very, very high in the 90s percentile against severe illness and hospitalization from COVID. Overall efficacy in the United States has been somewhere in the mid 70s, like 72, 73% against all COVID-19 infection following vaccination. And it's effective against both the South African and Brazilian variants. So it is a very effective vaccine for people who are they don't like to get shots, they get nervous getting vaccinated or getting any kind of shots, or for whom getting out of the house to get to a vaccine appointment is really problematic. The J&J vaccine provides an amazing opportunity to be able to offer them protection with just a single dose. It already has been approved. As you can tell, I need to update my slides. It is already distributed here in Arizona, and we'll talk in just a minute about what the state of Arizona is doing in terms of providing the J&J vaccines for essential workers. Every J&J vaccine that has come to the state of Arizona, not through the pharmacies, but to the state itself, is being reserved for essential worker administration at this point. So for folks who've got employees who are nervous about getting a shot, that is available to them, and they can go through the county and state sites, and I'll show you those in a second. So again, 72% effective in the US, 85% effective in overall severe disease. Again, high numbers. 43,000, over 43,000 participants who participated, only 468 symptomatic cases of COVID-19. So again, very, very low numbers of people getting COVID from the vaccine. And it provides that protection against the severe illness. So very, very effective. Again, I think it's a wonderful vaccine, and it provides lots of opportunity, which is super important when we're looking at wanting herd immunity to be happening sooner and more quickly. So, will I still need to wear a mask? Obviously, the answer is yes. In public places and in healthcare settings, the CDC is still recommending that we wear a mask. If you are getting together with somebody who is vaccinated themselves, or if the person who you're getting together with is at low risk of COVID and non-vaccinated, then they're saying you do not need to save space, you do not need to wear a mask. But as you gather multiple households together, unless every single individual has been vaccinated, they are recommending that you continue to do the things that have protected people along the way: wearing a mask, hand washing, and safe spacing. Rochelle Walensky, who is the head of the CDC at this point, has said that new guidelines for vaccinated individuals will be coming out I think the CDC is really waiting until we get to certain vaccine milestones in terms of the numbers of people vaccinated before they begin to pull back on the requirements for safe spacing and mask wearing. But she has indicated that that will be coming. So is it safe to get the COVID-19 vaccine even if you've had COVID? Absolutely. It's important that you get vaccinated. It gives you longer and better protection. We know now that we've had so many people who've had antibody testing done following their own infection with COVID, that protection from the COVID infection is variable. Some people's infection provides them protection for only a couple of months. Other people have much longer protection. So it's not consistent, and we don't know what provides somebody that longer protection versus shorter, except for vaccination. So as soon as you've been cleared from isolation, you are free and able to get vaccinated, and it will not give you any more of a kind of a stronger immune response when you get the vaccine having had COVID. Your antibodies and your immune system kind of marry up together to provide the protection. Your body does not see those antibodies as other, so your response to the vaccine is no different than somebody who's not had COVID themselves. So where should you get accurate information? The CDC has amazing websites that provide lots of questions and answers. It's written at a very readable level, about the 5th grade reading level. Information is available in English and Spanish. And it's a great place to send people who want more information themselves. So that is the most reliable source. I know there have been some others that have come out, but really when the CDC is the one providing the guidance to the country, kind of looking there for information, has just been a really good kind of process for us at Hospice of the Valley. And so we do like to encourage others to use the CDC for their information as well. So the vaccine information sites themselves, this is great information. So the Arizona Department of Health has a vaccine registration site. Everybody must go through that site to register for individual vaccine appointments. How Hospice of the Valley was able to stand up our own vaccine clinic was by partnering with Maricopa County. They have an application process that you can go through. I've put the link here to host your own vaccine event. You can do it for your staff, you can do it for residents, or you could offer it within your community if you wanted. And it's a very easy process. Giving the vaccine really wasn't a burden. It really allowed us to offer some hope, frankly, to our staff, our volunteers. And then we did partner with the county and had members from the county coming to get vaccines from us. As I said, the county is working very hard to help people who are having trouble finding a first or second dose, find areas that they can get vaccinated. And so we were one of those and provided some vaccines to the members of the community. So all that's really needed is a desire to give vaccines. If you're able to give the J&J vaccine, I would encourage that, because then you don't have the responsibility of scheduling a second dose vaccine to individuals. It's kind of one and done, and you can have a sign up. With all the vaccines, they do have some very particular handling requirements. For example, the J&J vaccine can only be kept at room temperature for 2 hours. So you need to use all the doses within the vial within that 2-hour period. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccine can be kept at room temperature for up to 6 hours, but then there's, high dose freezing and then refrigeration requirements. So the county has been really wonderful to work with, excuse me, and they'll work with you around making sure that you've got the storage requirements and that you understand how to administer the vaccine. But I'm happy to answer any questions about standing up your own kind of vaccine point of distribution. And then the county again has list of all the vaccine locations in the county available and links to make vaccine appointments on their website. So that's where I would go to get vaccine appointments and send your staff who are interested if you're not going to host your own event. So again, everybody's got to do their part. Getting vaccinated is really the only way to get back to normal life. And we don't yet know what numbers we're going to need to get community control and then herd immunity as a country. But we do know that numbers have gone down since vaccine numbers have gone up. So we're already seeing some evidence of the benefit of getting vaccinated in terms of getting COVID under control. I was asked to provide some information on COVID testing here in Maricopa County. Again, the Department of Public Health has information on the testing clinics, what to do while you're waiting, and other testing resources. So I would start there. Arizona Department of Public Health has 300 sites across the state. They differentiate between offering rapid and PCR testing. I know that in Maricopa County, Embry Women's Health has stood up a lot of clinics. They are completely free. The federal government is supporting COVID testing as well as vaccination, so that there are no costs if somebody doesn't have insurance. If somebody does have insurance, they will collect insurance information and they'll bill insurance, but the individual themselves is not does not have to pay any co-pays for any of that. And I think that's it. And I'm happy to open it up for questions at this point.
All right, thank you, Rachel.
Mhm.
I would love to have you speak a little bit more about the hosting a site, because what I'll tell you from my firsthand knowledge is, as I said before you started talking about how the turnout rate of caregivers getting vaccinated is lower than what we would all like. But I was fortunate enough to have one of our partners communities that was hosting a site open it up to our caregivers. And when that happened, it was so we had such tremendous turnout because it was simple as them showing up. They didn't have to register online, and the challenges when you try to register online, there's no dates available or it's months out and so forth. And so I personally think I've gone to that site that you're talking about hosting one. I think I filled that out about a week or 10 days ago, and I have not heard back yet. So if you could just maybe talk more about that, because I think that's one way that's going to really help increase the caregiver vaccination rate among all the members that are on this call here.
Absolutely. So that site, that application actually first came out back in December. We filled out an application at that point. It took about 4 weeks for us to get notified from the county asking if we still were interested in hosting a vaccine site. We said, absolutely. All that is required is that you enter the information into the state system for each person that you vaccinate. It takes about, maybe 30 seconds to enter each individual. What that allows is for the state to have kind of an understanding of each individual's vaccine history related to the COVID vaccine, so that somebody couldn't mistakenly get a dose from a different manufacturer or get 2 doses. So that is really the only requirement that the county and state have, is that within 24 hours of giving a dose of vaccine, you enter that information into the state ACES system, which is where all vaccinations are recorded. But we were able to, within about 4 days, stand up our vaccine pod. We did give the Mrna vaccine, so we needed people to register, but we made it as simple as possible. If we have the opportunity to give the Jnj vaccine, we will just have people sign up for a time slot, and we can do that manually, because I agree with you. It really is removing all of the friction in the system that lets people come in and get vaccinated. The easier you make it, the more people are going to show up. And so, saying we've got space between 10 and 12 and 12 and 2, like just do 2-hour increments and have people sign up and fill your slots. is really how I would approach it. I wouldn't make it really difficult. And then when people get there, the great thing is that there are a lot of public health departments across the country. We actually took our Mrna checklist and consent from the state of Georgia. They're publicly available. And so we just took it and modified it for us. But I'm happy to provide any resources, any help, to anybody who's standing up their pod, either in getting the application done or as you're trying to stand things up, because as I said, we're trialed by fire here now. And I think we had a really successful run of it. We ran our vaccine point of distribution for about 3 months, and we gave 1,200 vaccines.
That's great. Yeah, I see we have a couple of questions in the chat room. Before I start to read some of those, if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do so now. All right, well, I'm going to start with a question here about that has my interest as well. It says, how long does the protein stay in your body? And then kind of a follow-up question as well is, why does the vaccine offer more long-term protection than natural antibodies from having COVID? Don't both trigger the same immune response to recognize and fight off the foreign bodies?
I'll start with the second one. It's a fantastic question. The reason that the scientists think that the vaccine provides more protection is because it's a standardized dose, which triggers specifically the T and B lymphocytes. We know that some people have asymptomatic experience with COVID infection, or they have a mild case. It's kind of like how you can have a coworker who has a terrible cold and boy, they're sneezing and sick for, 3 weeks. And, you get a cold and it lasts for just a day or two. You've had less exposure, less immune response, if you will, to that cold virus than they have. They're probably going to have more antibodies than you do just because of your exposure compared to theirs. COVID reacts in much the same way. Some people's immune response is much greater. I'll take, for example, my father, who had a very severe case of COVID. He still had antibodies at 4 months, but my friend who lives back east, who's a nurse, had an asymptomatic case that actually was discovered through testing at work. And her immune response only lasted about 9 weeks, and then it went away when she was doing antibody testing. So, there's a lot of variation from infection. The vaccine is kind of a level playing field for your immune system. And then I think the other question was, how long does the protein stay in your body? So really what the vaccine does is it introduces fat, it's lipid-based, that has the mRNA, which is the messenger RNA. The protein spikes are really what the immune system keeps with it so that it recognizes it. It's not protein per se, it's really a mirror image of those spike proteins on the COVID virus itself. So it's not that the protein stays in your virus, it's that your immune system recognizes it. It's kind of like an ID card for COVID, if you will. That's the best way to describe it. I hope that answered their question.
Yeah, I think so. Before I get to the next question, I'll just kind of make a statement as well. Now that I'm fully vaccinated, my wife's father and his father, so grandfather, are both now fully vaccinated, and I'll be seeing them this weekend, and it's pretty exciting because I could give them a hug, handshake, or whatnot, because the new CDC guidance that came out last week said that is okay with 2 fully vaccinated people. So if that's any reason alone to make sure to get vaccinated, it feels like such a relief of fresh air and freedom to be able to do something like that we took for granted for such a long time. Right. And even in the office, my director, she's now fully vaccinated as well. And we've been meeting with masks on, for an hour every morning. It's nice to not have to be wearing that mask since the guidance allows that. And my understanding is that probably about every couple of weeks or so, we're going to be continuing to see continued relaxation of those guidelines from the CDC based upon the future vaccination rate continuing to go up. Do you have any information on that you could echo or share about potential relaxation of guidelines?
You know, I share your excitement. I'm also fully vaccinated, and it is amazing to be able to do things that we took for granted for so long, you know, hugging a loved one. We've been super careful in our family. We've got some people who've got high health risks, and so we've not done any of that until now. And so the CDC has said that they have kind of a timeline of relaxation. They will do it based on community spread numbers as well as number of vaccinated individuals. I think they're a little concerned about the holidays that are coming up as well as spring break. They're going to wait until after the effects of that, because frankly, we saw really high spikes after Thanksgiving and then Christmas and New Year's. So I would imagine the next relaxation of guidelines probably won't happen until the second or third week of April, just because they're going to be monitoring the effects of the holidays, you know, Passover, Easter, spring break. St. Patrick's Day is a big day for folks getting together. So they're being very cautious, and they don't want to open things up too quickly, but they want to recognize that there's got to be a benefit to people getting vaccinated. And so I think it's finding that sweet spot.
Okay, great. Let's see. I know there was at least another question here. It was, it was asking about if HOV is an actual site, a location that that I believe it's asking, like, if the general public, like our members here and so forth, could go to, or is this like private for HOV employees and vendors?
Great question. It was a closed pod. The county had very stringent requirements that we vaccinate just our employees and volunteers who were part of that 1A group. They then opened it to members of the community who they were helping to find second doses of the Mrna vaccine. Our pod, our point of distribution, closed last Thursday, and we are working very hard with the county to see if, as the J&J vaccine becomes available, is there an opportunity for us to have wider administration. We're definitely looking at our patients and caregivers, but we'd like to be able to offer it to others as well. So at this point, it's not available to anybody because we're closed, but we are in close communication with the county.
Okay, all right. So some more reason you had to sign up and get your own one set up there.
Right.
Yeah, and a question from earlier on, I'm not sure if this was addressed or not, but the question says, I thought it was, I'm assuming it is one of the vaccines was not FDA approved. Is it approved? And my understanding is that those are approved under the emergency use authorizations. Is there more to say about that?
So there is a difference between full FDA approval and emergency use authorization. So they're authorized to be administered. FDA approval requires that all of the questions be answered around the vaccine or any drug. So how often should it be given? How long does protection last? What emergency use authorization implies is that all the questions about the vaccine administration have been answered to the satisfaction of the FDA and the two independent groups that have reviewed all of the vaccines that have come to market, while the rest of the information about length of time between vaccines in terms of boosters, et cetera, continue to be collected.
Okay. And there was a follow-up question to that as well, about saying, so that if we take it at this time, are we not a part of the clinical trial? My understanding is yeah, that this is not a clinical trial at this point. But then it then goes on to says, when is the complete trial going to be over so we have more data? And I think what the person's asking here, if and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think trying to get at is, you know, there's so some of those questions of how long is this going to last for, and are we able to still transmit it from one person to another if you've been vaccinated, with the reason why we still need to wear masks and so forth. So can you speak a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So we actually have two members of the clinical trials who work with us here at Hospice of the Valley. So I've been able to get kind of insider information. One is in the Pfizer trial, one is in the Mrna trial. And when we talk about clinical trial participants, we're really talking about the 43,000 people who signed up to get the vaccine before it had any approval at all for Mrna, the 40,000 for Pfizer, and then the 40,000 or so who signed up for J&J, those people, when they signed up for the trial, agreed to continue to have their blood drawn at regular intervals so that the manufacturers of the vaccine could assess for the level of protection and whether or not it waned over time, et cetera. We do know as of right now that the vaccines are effective for at least 11 months for the Pfizer and Mrna vaccine and at least 5 months for the J&J vaccine. But the information about the length of time won't be gotten. We won't have all of the information really until they say, okay, now we understand based on the pool of people who are part of the trial, what the characteristics of the vaccine are long-term in terms of protection. So I would expect that we'll have more information over time, but the goal really was to get this virus under control. We needed to get the vaccine in people before we had all the answers. Otherwise, it could be 3 years from now, and we would all still be wearing masks and doing all the things that we are, so eager to put behind us. So that's why the emergency use authorization for all 3 vaccines was so critical, and why we can all feel confident, because they know the safety of the vaccine itself is there. They just don't have all the questions answered about the long term.
Yeah. All right, I think we have one final question. So if anyone else has any, unmute here. But the final question that I'm seeing is in regards to if you are going through chemotherapy, is that safe to get the vaccine, or what are your thoughts there?
It's a great question. It's one the CDC has answered. It's actually one of the screening questions we've got, and it's not just chemo. I want to expand it. Anybody who is on any immune suppressants. So if you've got Crohn's or rheumatoid arthritis, or if you've got cancer and you're getting chemotherapy, anything that suppresses your immune system, it is recommended that you get the COVID vaccine. It's also very strongly suggested that you continue to use protections even after general protections have been loosened, because your immune system is blunted or suppressed, as it were. You're likely to have less of an immune response to vaccine, but it will provide you with some protection. And that's important, because were you to get infected, you're liable to have a more severe or significant course of the virus. So yes, you should get vaccinated. It is approved for people. People were part of the clinical trials who were on immunosuppressants and chemotherapy, but the CDC and the manufacturers recommend that you continue to mask, safe space, recognizing that you'll get some protection, but probably not full protection from the vaccine, because your immune system is already being kind of held back, as it were.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And I do have another question here.
Yeah, Jude, did you see that very last question that came in?
Yeah. And I was just going to ask this question here. There's, and I think this is indicative of a lot of people where, they have a lot of, fears about this, anything that's unknown. And this is in many ways still very unknown. And so is there any sort of a place or source that someone could go to find out about the frequency and the amount of adverse effects and potential deaths that have occurred from being vaccinated?
Sure. So all 3 of the vaccine manufacturers have websites on their COVID-19 vaccines. There have been no deaths from any of the vaccines that are being used in the United States, to my knowledge. The 8 people got COVID with the Pfizer vaccine. I think 7 people got COVID with the Mrna vaccine. There were a few anaphylactic reactions, so people who had known reactions to other things where they already had a severe kind of immune response, but those were treated successfully without any deaths. But that data, all that data is available. I know the AZNHA vaccine, which is being used right now in Europe and India and some other places around the globe, there have been some recent reports of blood clotting and some associated deaths with that vaccine. That is not one of the vaccines that has been approved yet in the United States. There is more research going on to try and understand why those events happened. If there are any common things with the individuals. that might let the manufacturer and us as the administrators of the vaccines know to screen people for those things so that they don't get that vaccine. But none of the vaccines, the J&J vaccine, Mrna vaccine, and Pfizer vaccine, have had any of those kind of adverse events. And frankly, we're up in the many millions of people having gotten vaccinated across our country and across the globe with these 3 vaccines. And, you know, we're not hearing stories of people having really severe or, you know, mortality or morbidity related to the vaccine. So I think the number of people who've gotten the vaccines and the fact that there's just not a story to tell about the bad side effects in terms of, you know, people dying or people having really long lasting severe side effects. It's just not there. So I think that alone should make us all feel more confident.
Yeah, when you went through those examples of the handful here and this and that, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but I believe we're at about 40 million people maybe that are vaccinated.
Right.
And you just literally gave like a handful of some examples. Now, of course, in your stats show that there were, you know, it's not uncommon for someone to get a headache or sore arm. I had a sore arm on the first one, nothing on the second one, but nothing that doesn't make I think the risk well worth the reward.
And, you know, I want to really, again, point out, I think that's a great point, that those are expected immune responses to getting the vaccine. Frankly, when you get a tetanus shot, you get a sore arm, right? I remember my last tetanus booster, I could barely get myself out of bed in the morning. So I think there's a difference between having a side effect from the vaccine and having a known immune response that may be temporarily unpleasant. I think that's what we would categorize fatigue, headache, chills, or sore arm. It's really nothing different than people get when they get their flu vaccine every year, or if they get a Tdap booster. So I don't think that shows that the vaccines are unsafe. I think it shows that they're vaccines getting your immune response revved up.
Yeah. Well, I think we have time for one more question. And I know Laurel said she was going to unmute herself and ask the question. So you want to take it away, Laurel?
Thank you very much, Jude. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you, Rachel, very much for your presentation and the valuable information. I've heard that Italy is going through a 3rd wave and was starting to lock down again. Do you have any information as to what is actually making that happen? Are there fewer people that are getting vaccinated? Anything you could offer would be great.
So what I understand about Italy is kind of the same thing that I expect we'll see in a week or two in Texas and other places. They opened up pretty rapidly. They did not have a phased approach to vaccination numbers. So they just said, okay, people are starting to get vaccinated, life can go back to normal. And people are eager for that. I mean, we're all eager for that. But if you do it too quickly, there are still cases in the community, and asymptomatic spread accounts for somewhere around 50% of the cases of COVID that are out in every community, including in Italy. But all it takes is for somebody who's asymptomatic to come in contact with an unvaccinated person who's in a high risk group to kind of tip things off again. And that's what's happening there, unfortunately. So again, keeping track of all of the things that we need to continue to do, no matter how much we want to stop, is key to us keeping the numbers low as we continue to increase the number of vaccinated individuals. There will come a point, you know, Dr. Fauci said on the news last week that he thinks by the 4th of July, we'll be able to gather in larger groups to celebrate the 4th of July. But if we start deciding that that needs to be Easter before the science shows that that's safe to do, we're probably going to spend the 4th of July locked down even tighter than we are right now. So I think that's what's happening there. And it's a cautionary tale for us here in the United States and around the world.
Thank you very much. And Linda, it looks like this is being recorded, Linda or Lisa or whoever is responsible for this. And will it be sent out? Because I would certainly like to share this with others.
It will not be sent out because of the size of the piece that we're going to end up with. It takes me about 45 minutes to download a video this long. So I don't think I can get it sent out. However, it will be put on the members only section of our website.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Anything
All
else?
right. Should I close it up, Linda?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Rachel, for this is our educational monthly series, and this is the heart of education with something so important like this. And thank you, Aaron from Elia Care as well. The board of directors would like to thank you for participating today, and we will be back next month. I think we may know very shortly the next month's presentation, but stay tuned. You'll be seeing that from an email from Linda. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining, and I encourage you all to try to look into hosting one of those sites. I think that'll help with the overall goal of getting people vaccinated there. And have a good rest of your day, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Rachel, thank
Thanks,
you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.